Chapter 1. Aelithra practiced her sword drills as if her father was watching her. It was all too easy to imagine his sharp eyes on her, cataloguing her form, her speed, catching all the ways she was still not perfect at this. Like he caught all the ways she was not perfect at anything. This was the only thing she could do that pleased him, though his approval was rare even for this. She pushed on anyway, past the point of pain and fatigue, knowing that any weakness at all was the worst possible thing she could show. She gripped her sword held tightly in one hand and her short dagger in the other, hoping to mask the slight tremble in those hands as she pushed through another wave of exhaustion. The sun was high and hot, and she hadn't stopped for water in what felt like hours. Her concentration was broken suddenly as a servant stepped into her field of vision, a rare sight. Her training grounds were in a small, out-of-the-way courtyard close to her room, so she didn't need to go wandering the halls of the palace getting underfoot. Her father had ordered it built for her to try and keep her focused on her lessons. He had reasoned that there would be less to distract her, and it would stop her distracting the servants. She knew that the servants had all been warned not to disturb her training, had been told not to disturb her at all. She wished sometimes that they would. That someone might break the rules just once, that someone might see her. Her tendency to follow the servants and ask questions had led to cold admonishments when she was a child, admonishments that had left her now, at 23, unable to bring herself to interrupt a servant's work to ask any questions for fear that it might be considered frivolous, or worse, something she should already know. She watched the servant cross the courtyard, head down and clearly trying to go unnoticed. She had noticed that the palace was becoming full of an anticipatory energy. She wondered if it was a party or a celebration that she had forgotten about. She swallowed her anxiety at the idea that this would be another thing she wouldn't know the customs behind, and would embarrass her father once again if she were even permitted to attend. She was not a very good princess. The servant disappeared through a door that led to the main halls of the palace. She rubbed at her forehead, swiping at the hair that was stuck there, pressing lightly at the bridge of her nose to try and ward off the slight ache that was taking up residence in her head. Then she drew herself back into a fighting stance. "You should drink some water." It was embarrassing how she startled at the voice, spinning in place to look behind her. Her brother Kieran stood outside the ring of sand and gravel that was her training ground. He was leaning lightly against the silver birch tree that had offered her shade for most of the morning, until the sun had risen too high for it to matter. She opened her mouth to respond, but closed it again without speaking, as always unsure of what to say to him. Kieran wasn't like her eldest brother Brennan, who spoke to her in clipped tones and glared at her if she dared to say anything more than "Yes, Brennan," or "No, Brennan," in response. Brennan had less time for her than even their father did, and always made sure she was aware of it. Kieran, though, she couldn't quite figure him out. He had hated her when they were children. She couldn't remember anything from before their mother had died, but she could remember after, and she remembered Kieran ignoring her, shouting at her, or pretending that she didn't exist. He still did that now, pretending she didn't exist, but usually only when their father or Brennan were around. When they were alone, he would talk to her, soft and hesitant, like he was unsure of what to say and how to say it. He was holding her canteen out to her. She moved towards him carefully and dropped her weapons into the rack at the edge of the training area. She reached out and took the canteen, careful not to grasp it close to his hands. He was wearing his gloves, of course, but it was better to avoid the risk of accidentally touching skin and triggering a vision. She had learned that as a child as well, had seen him collapse into a fit of seizures at an accidental brush of skin from a servant. She raised the canteen to her lips. It was only after the water touched her dry mouth that she took notice of how thirsty she really was, and had to force herself to pull away after 2 gulps. "Thank you," she said, squeezing at the canteen to give her hands something to do. He nodded. "You're doing well." There was an odd look in his eyes when he said that, and she couldn't quite make out what it was. She frowned. "I am," she answered, unsure if he was asking or telling her. "I hope to be able to join the Forest Guard on a hunt soon." Which was the truth. She had heard about the increase of creatures emerging from the forest, monstrous now in sight and nature, attacking any they came across. She felt her sword skills, though untested in real battle, might be of use. She had been working up the courage to request this of her father, but she knew he would demand to see her skills, and if they were anything short of perfect, she would be denied. Kieran, for some reason she couldn't understand, looked sad at that. Pained almost, but he didn't meet her eyes. Instead, he cast his upwards to the branches of the tree above them. There was a long moment of silence between them before he looked at her again. "Father wishes to see you," was what he said at last. Aelithra's first instinct was to think she had done something wrong, something that had displeased him, that she had to fight to keep those words from spilling out to her brother. But she had done nothing recently, save train hard. The last time she had spoken to him, her father had bestowed on her a rare compliment on her stamina. She realised absently that the hand she was not holding the canteen in had crept up to tug at the end of her braid. When had she started? She forced herself to lower her hand. "Do I have time to freshen up?" she asked. She already knew the answer by how Kieran's mouth twisted slightly in sympathy. "I'm afraid not. He wished to speak with you immediately in his study." She nodded, suddenly very aware of the fact that she was in her training leathers. Her skin was slick with sweat, her hair sticking to her forehead. But she knew better than to make her father wait. She would take his displeasure at her appearance over his anger at being kept waiting. "Thank you," she said, curt and perfunctory, before turning away. She almost paused when she saw him start towards her, like he wanted to say something, but his outstretched hand never touched her, and he didn't speak, so she didn't stop, leaving the training courtyard to follow the path of the servant into the main halls of the palace and towards her father's study.